Hello everyone again, and welcome once more to Emain Macha, Navin Fort, one of the high energy spots here in all of Ulster. And with me today I've got Petra Carroll from the Navin Fort and Area Heritage Community Group. And Petra has a wealth of knowledge about this place, and she's going to take us a short tour around it to fill us in on the information. And we also have the dogs with us today, because we want you to see how the dogs change the behaviour. Once they get onto the mound, onto the energy spots, the behaviour becomes erratic and they begin to go around with the high energy. That's something we want you to see, because it has to be seen to be believed, really. Emain Macha was the ancient capital of Ulster at a time when Ireland had 5 provinces: Ulster, Munster, Leinster, Connacht and Meath, each with their own Rí Cuaige, which meant a king of 1/5. Navin Fort here behind me, and the hill, was the ancient seat of royal power, with activity here as late as medieval times. In fact, there's been 2 millennia of continuous activity at this very site. It primarily consists of a ring ditch enclosure, shadowed by a circular mound at its centre, and the remains of a ring barrow or burial ground. And there's a circle of trees right round the base of it here, mostly hazel, ash and oak. This is the ancient mound right behind me here that is believed to have housed the kings of Ulster in Cuchullin's time. And before that, it was dedicated to the goddess of fertility and birth. While the Celts, in the 1st century BC, were in retreat in Britain, pushed to the fringes of England and Wales by the Romans, and under threat in Scotland, in Ireland here, their society and pagan religion still dominated. And Emain Macha, where we are now, referred to in Ptolemy's 2nd century AD map of Ireland, the first ever of the country, is a vital part of that society. The recent discovery of the remains of many figures of 8 buildings confirm that Emain Macha had long been a place of spiritual importance. Navin Fort is without doubt one of the most significant ancient sites in Ireland, a place where Irish mythology and archaeology entwine. A sacred site of prominence especially between 300 BC and 300 AD, linked with Ulster kings, especially Conor MacNessa and his Red Branch Knights, and of course Cuchullin. Myths, legends and fairy tales all bring us messages and lessons for learning. They all have something important to say. And the myths and legends embedded in Emain Macha are all about the suppression, the degradation and the denial of the feminine. And this ground here in Emain Macha carries the feminine energy, all connected to the ancient goddess Macha. The name Emain Macha itself means the twins of Macha. Macha, who gave her name to this place, was the horse goddess of the Tuatha De Danann. Known as the horse goddess because of the race she was forced to run against the best horses of the King of Ulster, despite her being heavily pregnant with twins. She was one of the triple goddesses, known together as the Morrigan, the others being Morrigan and Navin. She represented sexuality, fertility and childbirth, as well as ironically being a war goddess who could bring death and destruction as easily as the gift of life. There are various versions of the Macha tale. Some say she died giving birth after the race. Some say she delivered stillborn twins. Others tell of how she delivered a boy and a girl, while yet others tell they were both boys. The detail, however, is not the important thing in all of this. The main point coming from the myth about Macha is that she herself was degraded, ordered to race against the king's 2 best horses, while her pleas for help, compassion and respect in the pains and discomfort of giving birth were totally ignored by the males around her, including the Red Branch Knights, all of whom treated her just as a spectacle for their sport and entertainment, jeering and mocking her soul and belly. the sacredness of giving birth and bringing new life into the world, bringing a young soul from the other world into this one. The most incredible act of spiritual passage that exists in our world was desecrated and devalued, scoffed at and mocked by those who stood around and did not help Macha. This tale about Macha, the mythical Ulster goddess, is told in the myths of the Ulster cycle and relates how Macha, from the other world, the world of the legendary Tuatha, wishing to experience how to live life as a human, arrived mysteriously one day at the dwelling of a local man called Cruinneach, a widow, and began to care for him and his 2 sons. They married, and Cruinneach was proud of his wife's beauty, strength and agility. In time, the disguised goddess became pregnant, and shortly before she was due to give birth, the couple were invited to a feast at the home of the Ulster king Conor MacNessa at the time of Samhain, which marked the end of the Celtic year and celebrated the harvest. Macha, heavily pregnant, was not in any condition to attend and warned her husband not to talk about her or their life together. However, after a few drinks, Cruinneach began to brag about his pregnant wife's athletic prowess. The king grew angry and ordered Macha to be brought here, now and then, to race against his 2 fastest horses, on penalty of Cruinneach's life being forfeit if she refused. Macha won the race, but went into labour right at the finish, giving birth to twins. In her anger and pain, she cursed the men of Ulster because those around her refused to help her in her predicament. She announced that Ulster men would be granted great might and strength. However, at the very moment they were at threat of extinction by an enemy, they would be as vulnerable and weak as a woman giving birth. The curse was to last for 9 generations. No one knows what became of Macha and her twins after that, but she never went back to Cruinneach. It is generally believed she returned to the other world and took her twins with her. It was Macha, too, who gave her name to the town of Armagh, Macha, the primatial seat of Christianity in Ireland. Both of Macha's prophecies came true. This place became known as Emain Macha, the twins of Macha, and all through the Ulstermen's battles with Maeve, the mighty Queen of Connacht, their power deserted them, and they were struck down with the late pangs of labour when they needed to fight. Emain Macha here is also associated with the Red Branch Knights, the select group of warriors of the same King Conor MacNessa who caused such distress and degradation to the goddess Macha. And the Red Branch Knights are in turn associated with Cuchulainn. Cuchulainn was known as Setanta, the nephew of this same King Conor MacNessa and leader of his Red Branch Knights. The young man, born in Newgrange, was the only man in Ulster unaffected by Macha's curse. Setanta became known as Cuchulainn after slaying the guard dog of Cullen, blacksmith to King Conor, with a slither. In penance, he offered to take the hound's place and would forever after be known as Cuchulainn, Hound of Cullen. And we see in this story here the observance of the Brehon laws, the ancient Brehon laws which were observed in ancient Ireland. Setanta knew that one of the laws said that if you harm an animal or a watchdog of someone else, you have got to make retribution for that. So that was why Setanta became the Hound of Ulster. Now, Queen Maeve of Connacht, wife of Ailill, tried many times to entice the hero from his allegiance, and he battled every man she sent to him. Then Maeve realised that Cuchulainn was unaffected by Macha's curse, because his father was Lu, the sun god, and therefore Cuchulainn had divine Dedanan blood in his veins. His foster brother was sent to challenge the Ulster hero by Queen Maeve, and Cuchulainn was forced to slay his own kin, seriously injuring himself in the process. It was this moment that broke Macha's curse, and the battle began. Maeve and her men stole a prized brown bull during the cattle raid of Cooley, the Tan Bohulne. But on the journey back to Connacht, the brown bull met Ailill's famous white bull, and the two animals engaged in a brutal fight, lasting all day and all night. In the morning, the men of Ireland saw the brown bull going towards his own land with the mangled remains of the white bull hanging from his horns. For 2 days, the brown bull dropped the entrails of the white bull all over Ireland. Finally, he returned to Ulster and died. Eileen and Maeve then made peace with Ulster and Cuchulainn. For 7 years afterwards, nobody was killed in battle between the two sides. The men of Connacht returned to their own lands, and the men of Ulster returned to Emain Macha, full of great triumph and hailed as heroes. So ends the story of the Tan Bo Hulne. And we're here now at what is known as the fairy tree in Emain Macha, or also the rag tree. Petra, you know all about this, so please tell us what this is all about.
Okay,
What's
so
happening here?
a fairy tree or a rag tree would have been, it goes right back to the ancestors, the Irish traditions way on back, and they're normally either a black thorn or an ash tree, and found usually in the middle of a field or the side of a road somewhere, but normally in ground, most common as in sacred sites here
And
as well.
they're healing trees, aren't they?
They're healing trees, and people would come and leave wee garments and bits and pieces of or near and dear things belonging to them, in hope that they will receive healing or abundance or good health. And farmers would avoid cutting these trees down because they come with actually, you know, an old folk tale that if you cut them down, you'll end up having bad luck. So farmers will go to great extent to avoid cutting these trees down. Some farmers put huge rocks the whole way around them and avoid that them being cut by the grass cutter and plough and all of that.
And as the rags rot, does that mean that people are getting better? Is that why they leave them?
Yeah, so the thing is, as the rags start to decay and rot, that's the change in the transition of good health coming through, or the change of look even.
Change of luck, right, okay. Now here we are at the maca tree. Petra, explain the maca tree to us, please.
Okay, now this is just known locally as the maca tree, and if you look directly under the branch, that large branch coming out, you can see a silhouette of a beautiful goddess, and she's looking east. So you can see her from, if you're looking at her from side view, you can see nearly as if she's wearing a veil, and it's coming down into her breast and then out into her bump. And down, straight down, long, elegant legs right down. She's wearing a flowing dress, you know, and she's looking east. And that's locally known as the maca tree.
Thank you, Petra. And we brought the dogs with us today for a particular reason. To let you see how the behaviour changes when they come onto this mound we're standing on here. So just watch the dogs.
So this here is one of two trees that were cut down last year, and it's known as the old crone tree. Yeah, and a friend of mine had pointed this out to me. Her name was Colette, and you can clearly see the elephant's trunk and the elephant's legs, front legs coming out. And normally a tree would pick up on the energies that it's sending out. And in this one, we like to think that the elephant was the matriarch, the wisdom and the feminine, and representing all of that. So if you can, it's harder to see at this time of year because there's new growth coming, but you can see clearly the elephant's trunk and the elephant's knees coming down clearly into the ground. And there's a myth of the Navin dragon, and this dragon has appeared at the king's stables, and to protect the king's stables and stop them from destroying it. And it also has appeared on the trunk of this tree. The Navin dragon has appeared in old folkland stories throughout generations, and you can clearly see the nostrils of the Navin dragon, the beautiful big mouth, and coming up into its fierce eye, and you can see it from this angle quite clearly. And you know, local folk like to believe that's the protection and the representation of the Navin dragon coming in through the roots of the old crone tree. There's other animals that you can see if you study. Around the other side there's a tortoise, but unfortunately with the overgrowth at this time of year it's harder to see. But maybe who's to say we can come back and do that another day.
And here we are at our final stop on this tour of Emain Macha. Petra, we're now at the King's Stables, and over there is Haughey's Fort, this hollow swamp in front of us. Can you tell us a story about this, Petra, please? Why the King's Stables? What went on here?
Yeah, well, this here was actually an artificial pool standing at the edge of a lake, and it's over 2,500 years old. And this is where the Red Branch Knights came to water their horses and wash down their chariots. So that's how it got its name of the King's Stables. But prior to that, it was a sacrificial pool and an offering pool, and where they have found the skull's head of human. But what's interesting about it is the skull was actually, parts of the skull had been cut out and placed into the pool, and there was pottery dating 2,500 years back. The Haughey's Fort is just up behind us here, and you know, it probably had been in use for water and everything.
And it's encircled by a ring of trees, Petra, isn't it?
It's encircled by the trees that seem to have grown naturally in a circle, and it is a lovely walk in through that in a lovely spring morning or evening. You can see bulrushes growing in it there, and these rushes would have been used as lanterns in the time of no lights or electricity, so it adds to the whole feel of what was there at the time. It's very overgrown at the moment with briars and bushes, but it's deliberately kept like that because if you got into the pool, if you got into the other side, it is pure swamp, and it's swamp ground. You would sink into it, hence we had to pull the dog out earlier. So not recommended. Don't try at home.
Don't do this at home, demonstration purpose only. It's a very, very different kind of energy here, Petra.
Yeah,
even
it
the
is.
Dogs are very quiet.
Yeah, a lot more. Yeah,
very different energy from.
If you can pick up an energy, you definitely see the difference between the Navin Fort
Big difference.
And here. It's a lot more subdued.
But I feel it's a lot more oppressive, Petra.
Yeah, it's closed.
Maybe because of the sacrificial aspect of
maybe,
it, I don't know.
Maybe the fact that the trees have grown round. But then Haughey's Fort is of a different energy as well. But all these sites are all interlinked in some form. Mm-hmm. You know, there's ley lines that run between these sites. Yeah,
there were just different activities in each spot. Mm-hmm. Tell me, why is it called Haughey's Fort?
Haughey's Fort, it was named after the farmer that had the land when the site was discovered. And way back in 1910, I think it was, there was a great big boulder found on the land, and the farmer just wanted rid of this boulder. It was in his road. He wanted to be able to plough his field, and there was writing and scriptures on the boulder, but he just decided that it was the best way to get rid of it was to just blow it up. And unfortunately we don't know much more about it than that. So it hasn't really been excavated fully, so there's a lot of information held in Hockey's Fort that we've yet to find out.
And God knows what's down in under that, Petra.
Well, they did excavate that in, I think it was 75, not 100% sure, and that date could be wrong, but yeah, and that's when they found the pottery and bowls and skull. Also, there was a skull found between Hockey's Fort and the King's Stables, which resembled a wolf. But locals around here like to say that Santanta, the Hound of Hullion, it's the biggest skull of a dog that's ever been found in Ireland. And it used to be on show over at the Navin Centre, or a replica of that, but no longer.
No longer. Well, Petra, thank you very much indeed for all your information. This is the end of our tour now. We hope you've enjoyed that around Emain Macha. And we'll meet again shortly. And until then, thank you for joining us, and namaste.
Namaste.